Alright guys, this one is for all the history buffs and those who love their World War II stories. Today we're going to talk about the Day of Battle, which is the first book in a trilogy called the Liberation Trilogy, written by a man named Anzio. It's a fictional story based around real historical events, and I thought it would be cool to talk about this because, well, most people do. I know much about the war that was happening in Sicily and Italy during World War II. And so they end up having to wait for reinforcements to come in before they can make any progress. So we get a lot of scenes of the Americans holding off these attacks while trying to repair their tanks and get more supplies. I will admit that it does get boring at times, and I liked the characters, even if they did feel a little flat at times. I'd probably recommend it more to people who are already interested in the topic. It was nice to get some information about the actual events that inspired the story, and to learn more about the people who fought in the war in Italy. If you want to check out the book, I've left a link to it in the description below. And if you're interested in reading the other two books in the trilogy, then I'll leave those links as well. Because if you do not know much about World War II in Italy, you might find it a little confusing. There are a lot of names, places, and things that I was unfamiliar with, and it made it hard to follow the story at times. But if you're willing to do a little research, or if you're already knowledgeable about the subject, then I think you'll be fine. I guess my biggest issue with the book is that it's not really clear who the main character is supposed to be. Is it Franz? Is it Fant? Is it someone else? I'm not sure. Do you know much about the war in Italy? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye! It kinda switches back and forth between different points of view, without really focusing on any one character for too long, and so it's hard to really connect with anyone. You get a sense of their thoughts, their feelings, their motivations, but nothing beyond that. There's a lot of talking, a lot of planning, a lot of back and forth between characters that really doesn't seem to get them anywhere. But there are some good action scenes in there too, and overall, I think it's pretty well written. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's something that I didn't know about the war in Italy. I thought that the terrain was the only reason why they couldn't advance, but apparently it was also because they needed help. That makes sense. You can't just send a few thousand soldiers into enemy territory and expect them to hold it. You need backup, you need supply runs, and that's what ended up happening. It's overshadowed by everything else going on in Europe and in the Pacific. But it's interesting how we forget that there were also Italian partisans and resistance fighters just like there were in France. For example, fighting against the Nazis. Without giving anything away, basically the Americans end up finding out that there is a group of Maquisards or partisans that live in the area that are fighting against the Germans, and the Americans work with them to try to push the Germans back. But the partisans end up causing more problems than they solve, and so the Americans end up having to clean up their mess. It just felt like a missed opportunity to explore the Italian partisans more. I mean, yes, they were a problem. Yes, they did cause issues for the Americans, but they were also brave and selfless people who had been fighting against the Nazis for years, and I think that they deserved a better portrayal than what we got in this book. So this book takes place from 1943 to 1944, and at the beginning of the book, we meet our protagonist, Captain Peter Fant. He is a young American captain who arrives with his men in Sicily to take part in an invasion. Now, historically speaking, we do know that the Americans did invade and liberate much of Italy. What's interesting, though, is that the Americans don't know that he's there. They don't know that he's an enemy soldier. In fact, Franz ends up helping them out when he finds out that they need supplies. Now, obviously this is only temporary because eventually he is discovered, but it gives us a good insight into the situation on the ground, and it helps us understand why the Americans weren't able to move forward right away. But what I didn't know was that they were actually the second Allied force to invade. There was an initial invasion done by the British 8th Army under the command of Montgomery, but then when Montgomery failed to make much progress, the Americans came in after him. So that's where we pick up the story here. And honestly, I found it hard to get into at first because of the amount of names and places that were new to me, and also because the invasion isn't really described in great detail. Like, we don't get a sense of what it felt like to be there. We don't get any of the action. And instead we reintroduce to a German soldier named Franz, who has been stationed in Sicily, and he has been ordered to go to the front lines to report on the progress of the battle. That's not to say that we don't get any action. We do get some action, but it is not nearly as much as I expected going into this book, since it is advertised as a war story. Either way, Franz ends up getting lost while on his mission, and he stumbles upon Captain Fant and the American forces We learn that they're stuck behind enemy lines and that they're low on supplies, but the issue is that while they are waiting, they have to deal with the Germans who are constantly attacking them. However, I wasn't really satisfied with the ending. Anyway, I did enjoy the book overall. I enjoyed learning more about the war in Italy. Still, I think it's a good read for anyone who likes military fiction or historical fiction. One thing that I did appreciate about the book was the author's note at the end. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you read any of the books in the Liberation Trilogy?